Hey, how you getting on? Today, the baldest man on guitar YouTube either builds a tube amp or electrocutes himself in a hilarious fashion, or both. Stay tuned to find out what happened. Righto. This story starts with my Marshall 1959 SLP next to me. I bought this amp a couple of months ago and it needed some work done in order to get it to function properly. So I made a video about that with a tagline, what should I do with this amp now? Should I keep it? Should I mod it? Should I sell it? And equal parts to my delight and my disgust, most of the comments in that video were, keep it, that's the best tone you've ever had on your channel. And unfortunately, I agree. But I had already set my heart on modding it, so I had a problem there. But then I remembered I'm friends with the guys at Tube Amp Doctors, and they have amp kits. So I made the bold pitch to them, hey, how would you guys feel about me building one of your amp kits on the channel? And they said yes, which kind of terrifies me because now I have to do it. Heyo, Editing John here. One little thing, while editing this, I noticed that not once when I mentioned what kit I actually got from Tube Amp Doctor. It's okay, I've only been doing this for 3 years, but it's the brand new 50-watt Plexi kit from Tube Amp Doctor. I thought this kit was ideal because it's very close to my 1959 SLP, but with slightly less firepower. So that seemed like a really good fit. It's the new kit from Tube Amp Doctor, so that worked really well for both of us. Back to the video. This is the sweet head shell they sent with that, and that's where the amp's going to go in. I'm just going to put that here right now and explain to you guys what I have intended. I plan to make maybe a 5-6 part video series out of this, in which I build parts of the amp and then we go over the parts of the schematic that are relevant for that section. So we'll have both the practical aspects and the theory aspects, kind of understand how everything works. Now you might be asking yourself, what qualifies me to do that? Absolutely nothing. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm an automotive engineer by trade. And most of the electronics I just picked up along the way. I've worked on amps, I've fixed them, I've built pedals. So I'm not really that qualified to do that, but I'm still going to do my best. I will probably make a few little mistakes here and there while explaining the schematics, but you know, don't be too harsh on me. If you want to learn the actual theory, how amps work, there's a lot of great resources on the internet. There's great sources online, one being robrobinnet.com. You can learn an awful lot about how amps work there. The other one is valvewizard.co.uk, a fantastic website full of great information that is explained really, really well. This is the book by the author of the website, Merlin Blencow. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce that correctly, but it's fantastic information and I can't recommend it enough. Other great sources are the Evolve forum by Jason Tong. It used to be called Headfirst are his amps that he sells now. His DIY group changed his DIY project site changed its name to Evolve. But those are all great sources online. Anyway, this is part one of the series. We're going to unbox the amp kit, put together the big mechanical parts, and take a brief overlook over the entire schematic. And we're going to go into detail in the following videos. I've gone on record complaining about unboxing videos. I said I wouldn't do them. However, I feel this is kind of different. This is an amp kit, and it's kind of relevant how that's packed. It's not like I'm going to open the box and be surprised, ooh, there's an amp in here. I'm being mean now. Some of my friends do unboxing videos, and I don't want to complain about that. Now, before I start unpacking on this improvised table, a word of warning. Tube amps aren't beginner projects. If you have no idea how electronics work, maybe start with a pedal project. The voltages inside of tube amps can exceed 500 volts, and those are shocks that hurt. Even though I'm not an electronics engineer or an electrician by trade, I pretty much know which parts I'm allowed to touch and lick and which ones not, so be safe. However, if you want to build one of these amps, you can build the amp safely without powering it, and for the first power on and a check, you can send your amp kit back to Tube Amp Doctor. They'll check it for you, they'll make sure it's safe, so you can both enjoy the build and use it safely without being terrified that it'll burst into flames anytime soon. This is stuff I'll probably be repeating throughout these videos quite a lot, just to keep you guys safe. They sent this big old box there, and we have documentation, a bill of materials. That's cool. I've already looked at the documentation online, and it's fantastic. It's really well made. As an engineer, I have to deal with documentation regularly. I have to make documentation, and this is top notch. I have no complaints. So this is heavy. This will be one of the transformers, or possibly both. Here we have the chassis. I'm stoked. This package has been here for months. I'm finally getting to it. This is a choke. This is the other transformer. I think that's it. Yeet. God, I hope the tubes weren't in there. This is the chassis, and it seems like all the important components are in there. Let me get a knife. All right, we have different wires at different lengths here. Yeah, more wires, different colors. These are the capacitors and clamps, mostly the filter caps. We have some smaller capacitors here, as well as the fuses. No, those are resistors, sorry. There's caps as well. Well, these are mechanical parts, nuts and bolts, sockets, knobs, and potentiometers. Here's the IC power cord and 3 preamp tubes. Set of red-based power tubes, EL34s, nice. Oh, here's the turret board. Ah, cool, it's not populated, but the turrets or whatever you call them, they're in there already, so I don't have to smash those in. This is shielding. Ah, cool. And finally, the Tube Amp Doctor logo. Cool. Awesome. Here are the front and rear panels. They were taped to the chassis. Ooh, gold. Is there's a protective foil on here? It's going to be riveting television. Look at that. Our front and rear panels. Sick. Cool. I'm getting all the protective film off the chassis. Because the first thing we're going to do is kind of populate the large things. Put the transformers on, get all the jacks mounted, the potentiometers, the choke, the tube sockets, as well as the clamps for the filter caps. Smells good. So this is the output transformer, which obviously doesn't go there, but props here. It seems I've greatly underestimated the space I'm going to need for this. Cool. Oh, very nice. Look at this cute little choke. Nice. Here's the schematic. We're going to take a good hard look at that on the computer later on. Here's the layout. And Tube Amp Doctor recommend you stick to the layout that they recommend here. Here's the full layout as well, because if you start incorporating mods and doing things differently, they're going to have a harder time checking the amp if it doesn't work, or if they are supposed to check that thing for you. Look how professional I am. Clamp between the legs. I bet at this point Tube Amp Doctor are regretting sending me this. Because you want these bolts tightened down good and hard. You don't want any vibrations from the transformers. In fact, I had that on my VH4. One of the transformers was a bit loose there, which caused the amp to hum and vibrate quite a bit. Once I'd tightened the transformer nuts and bolts, it got a lot better. So cool. First transformer is in. So Merlin, I need your help already. Haha. To break from track, created for the day, for the war to get us back, for the war that gets us back. But I don't see the light at the end of this tunnel. All this seems to me so wrong. And finally, the big iron thingies we mount the choke. Good news. do is I've mounted 3 components and I've already made 2 mistakes. The first one was I mounted the power transformer, the mains transformer in back to front. I had the primary side pointing to the back where the IEC connector is because I thought that's where the power is coming from, but the mains transformer isn't connected to the IEC connector, it's connected to the power switch, which is on the front. So I had to turn that around. The other mistake is I noticed this little hole underneath the output transformer, which apparently is for a little bolt that needs to go in from this side to mount the standoffs for the turret board. So yeah, both of these things are stated in the documentation, so RTFM. Anyway, let's mount the rest of the standoffs, all the switches and jacks and stuff like that, the clamps, the tube sockets. Yeah, let's get into it. Better days you never see. Okay, so the standoffs are kind of small, 5mm. The smallest wrench I have is 5.5. That's not going to do, so pliers it is. Next up is a terminal strip that goes here for the wires coming out of the mains transformer that we're not going to use. Now you might be asking, why do we have wires we're not using on the mains transformer? I suspect because this is an international transformer that has wires coming out of it for US voltage or Japanese voltage. We have different mains voltage here in Europe, which is about 230 volts. The USA is I think 120 or 110. No, Japan is 110 or something like that. So depending on where you are, you'll be using different wires from the power transformer to actually power the amplifier to get the desired DC voltage you want to operate your tubes at. These are the clamps for the filter capacitors that pop out of the chassis here. I'm going to mount those next. As you can see, space is an issue here. That's one reason why I'm mounting all the components now, even though I'll probably have to temporarily remove some of them again to wire the whole thing up. So I'm putting everything in where it's supposed to go so I get an impression of how much space I'm going to have left in the end, as well as have it somewhat tidy so I don't lose components, don't have them flying around. So there's extra holes here, I don't know what they're for. Position you like that. That works. That works. I'm just trying to see where I'll position the clamp so I can get at the bolts that actually hold the capacitors in the best way. So I'm just going to orient them this way. Yeah. And lastly, I'm going to put the nuts and bolts in here that actually clamp down the capacitors, even though I'm not going to put them in yet, so I don't lose them. Make sure that the screw side is at the side you'll be able to get at later. It's actually one thing where I thought ahead. Good on me. Once every blue moon, I actually think ahead. Righto, tube sockets next. Let's start with the octal ones. Those are for the power tubes, the EAL34s in this case. They come in this bag. Right. Oh, I suspect. Now, before I clamp these down, I just want to make sure that they are as they're supposed to be in the layout. This is pin 1, pin 8, pin 1, pin 8. Yep, they're the right way around. Cool. Now, before we mount the no-vol sockets for the preamp tubes, there's a bias pot that goes between the power tubes, which is a 25K 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 And there's 3 of those in the SAM. One for the presents, I think. And the middle, those are B25Ks. It's probably these 2 here. ZB. Why is this different? Different shafts. This will be it. So there's a washer here that comes with it, with teeth. It's supposed to go in this way. Yep, that's not going anywhere. Next up, empty bag, don't need that anymore. Empty bag, don't need that anymore. Starting to free up space here, which is nice. Potentiometers, we don't need those yet. Fuse holders, here. Here's the novel sockets. I can't get them out the bag. Right, I'm gonna take the caps here for the shielding off. These have 2 purposes really. The primary is to protect the preamp tubes from electromagnetic interference, because those amplify our preamp signal and they're sensitive to noise. That's why these things are there. They shield them. But they also have the positive side effect of keeping the tubes where they're supposed to be, so they won't fall out so easily during transport. So there's only 2 more things as far as I can see that need to be mounted to the top or the bottom of the chassis, depending on how you look at it, and those are the grounding points. Here they are. Terminal solder lock washer lugs. Okay, and they go to see over at camera. Here, that's gonna be the ground for the IC connector, and this is gonna be the ground for other stuff. I don't know. Right, let's do the rear panel, which is on the floor, I think. Underneath the documentation, yeah. There we go, dirt on it because I'm an idiot. So we have the mains fuse, the mains connector, the B plus fuse, output selector, and speakers. So I'm looking at the amp upside down, so it needs to go on upside down. Let's start with the mains connector, which just kind of plops in. And we're going to mount it the way around so that the pin for the earth is close to the chassis. That just kind of pops in there as a window. So it doesn't really hold the panel on. Okay. Then let's do the fuse holders. Both are the same size. In fact, I'm going to loosen them a bit. I'm only going to clamp these down once I have everything for the rear panel in place. So next we got speaker jacks. I think they're all the same. We've got 6 identical ones, 2 for the rear panel for the speaker outs, and 4 for the front panel for the inputs. And last thing on the rear panel, we have the impedance selector switch, which is this here. We're positioning that properly later, but for now, that seems all right. So that's the rear panel sorted. Let's move over to the front panel. Now, boy, messed up again. I forgot this 4-pin solder terminal, which is going to be holding the rectifiers, and that needs to go somewhere here. Yep, it goes on the same bolt that holds down the tube socket. No, not the tube socket, the bracket for whatchamacallit, the the filter cap. So I'm just gonna screw this on top of here. So that's nice that the bolt is long enough for 2 nuts. Front panel also on the floor somewhere. We suck. So, right, let's start on this side with the switches. Okay, next up is the pilot light. Which tells us if this thing's on. Oh, okay, that gets popped in from the front. Plastic thread, gotta be gentle with that. Don't want to mess it up. Okay, next is the pots for the EQ. All right, we've got the golden Marshall style knobs here. I'm not going to put them on yet. So my main camera just died, but that's okay because that concludes the build section for the first video. I'm going to head over to the desk. We're going to take a look at the schematic as a whole and focus on the power section for today. In the next video, we'll be wiring all this stuff up and particularly taking a look at the heaters. Right on, that was the first part of the build, and it didn't even go too catastrophic. I expected far worse. I just made a few little mistakes, but nothing too bad, easy to fix. In fact, the only thing that went wrong was my video tech. One of my cameras died right at the end of it, and the video file corrupted, so that's why we only had 2 perspectives there. Let's get into part 1 of the theory. And I've got the product page for the amp open right here. This is Tube Amp Doctor's website, amp kit Plexi 50 watt lead. This is all in German. I live in Germany, that's why everything is German. And under Dokumente, which is documents, we have the full documentation. And it starts off with a warning to keep idiots away, but that didn't deter me, so that doesn't work very well. And we have the documentation that I was storing on the floor during the build, because that's how the pros do it. It has nothing to do with that I spend too much money on amplifiers and therefore don't have the space for a proper sized table or funds for clothing without holes. It's how the pros do it. So we have the schematic that we're going to take a look at in a sec. We have the layout of the turret board, the layout of the full amp, and then some details on the power supply, transformer layouts, and a list of fasteners there. These numbers, letters, alphanumerical codes were on the little plastic baggies as well, so they were easy to identify and it was easy to tell what fastener was for what component. No problems there. Really nicely done by Tube Amp Doctor. But today we want to focus on the schematic. And if you've never seen an amp schematic before, this can look a little weird, but it's actually quite simple. Today we're just going to take a brief overlook of the schematic, see how the signal runs, focus a bit on the power supply down here, and then go into more details in the parts to come. We'll be taking a look at a triode gain stage, how that works, and the preamp in part 3, for example. So what are we looking at? On the left-hand side, we have the inputs. This is a 4-input amplifier, 2 1 inputs, 2 2 inputs, 4 jacks that we can bridge, as it's famous for the Plexi. And on the other side, the right-hand side, we have the speaker out. So the signal runs from left to right. We have various different components in here. These blocks here are resistors. These double lines here signify capacitors. Blocks with arrows going through them, 3 connections, those are our pots. You see here volume 1, volume 2, middle, bass, treble, presence. These thick black stripes with the thin white stripes, those indicate the big electrolytic capacitors that we have there. There are two capacitors in one housing. One is black, one is white, because those are polarized, so they have a dedicated minus and a dedicated plus pole. They need to be connected that way, because if you don't, they can be after exploding. They can actually blow up, I hear, if you connect them the wrong way. It's supposed to smell really awful as well. Hasn't happened to me yet, but we're pretty early in the build. Maybe this is the time that it happens to me. Hopefully not. I can see here in the bias section we have more electrolytic capacitors. These circular things here with the 3 connections, those are triode gain stages. And the big ones back here are EL34s, so or octal power tubes. These squiggly lines with the 2 straight lines are transformers. We have our output transformer here and our power transformer, our mains transformer over here. These arrow symbols here are rectifier diodes. This is the choke. This is a lamp or indicator lamp. Those are switches. And the blocks with the lines through with the value for A, those are our fuses. We have a 2 ampere mains fuse and a 0.5 ampere high tension fuse. Our signal comes into one of the inputs or several of these inputs if we bridge them and go through the first gain stage. Oh, one more thing about gain stages. You will have noticed that we have 6 symbols here for triodes, but we only have 3 preamp tubes. What's up with that? Now, that is because each 12AX7 or ECC83 or 7025, which are for all intents and purposes the same type of tube or valve, is a double triode. So each one of these little glass containers contains 2 triodes. That's why we have them denoted here as V1B and V1A. So these here are one tube. They are the first tube in the circuit. This is the second tube of the circuit, V2, and V3, which is the phase splitter here, is the third tube. So the signal comes in through one or several of these inputs here, run through various resistors, gain stages, capacitors. The signal gets amplified and distorted throughout here. This here is the cathode follower, and I'm going to explain what that is in a later part of the series. Basically, you can see the signal taps out of the plate. This is the cathode of the triode gain stage. This is the control grid where the signal comes in. And this is the plate where the signal usually is extracted and goes to one of these coupling caps here. But this is the cathode follower. This is slightly different. The signal comes out of the cathode, which is why it's called a cathode follower. What that basically does is it adds compression for one thing, but it converts the signal to a lower impedance signal where the tone stack is more effective. It's also good for effects loops because pedals can process those signals better when they're lower impedance. So the tone stack here consists of a network of capacitors, resistors, and 3 potentiometers, and the signal comes out of the wiper of the treble pot. In my 1959 SLP, this is where the effects loop is. The signal goes out, comes back into the amp to be fed into the phase splitter. This is also where you could place a master volume knob if you wanted one. I believe the master volume version of this amp from Tube Amp Doctor has its volume pot here. Anyway, the signal goes into the phase splitter, which is a 12AX7, which is strictly actually part of the power amp, not the preamp anymore, but sometimes we call it a preamp tube. What this is 2 parallel stages that split the signal.
Sorry, a bit of a retake here. I made a bit of a dog's dinner explaining this. So again, the signal comes into the phase splitter, which is also known as the phase inverter. I think I prefer that term because I think it's more accurate. The signal doesn't really get split. It doesn't get chopped up. But the 2 parallel stages of the phase inverter do the following. One side gives out the signal in phase, and the other side gives out the signal flipped out of phase. One side goes to one of the EL34s here, and the other, the inverted side goes to the other EL34 here. Now the question is, why do we do this? What is the point of that? We need them because that is how our class AB power amp works, which is also known as a push-pull power amp. One side of that power amp amplifies slightly over 180 degrees of the sine wave, and the other side amplifies the other slightly more than 180 degrees. So the power amp pushes and pulls. The signal is put together again on the primary of the output transformer. You can see one tap of the primary is connected to the plate of V5, and the other side is connected to the plate of V4, which are our EL34s. And there's a center tap, which is connected to the high tension line here. The signal is then transformed to a more speaker-friendly impedance. We have our output taps here, 16 ohm, 8 ohm, and 4 ohms, connected to the impedance selector switch, which goes to the speaker outs and then to our speaker cabinet. We're going to go into more detail about the phase inverter and the power amp in part 4 of this series. So if all of this doesn't make an awful lot of sense to you right now, don't worry. We're going to go through the preamp, the triode gain stage, the phase inverter, the power amp, and all of that in later parts of this series. But for today, I just want to focus mainly on the power supply. And to me, the most complex part of the power supply is the mains transformer, our power transformer. But before we get there, we need to get power from the wall. And in my case, that's 230 volts here. I'm in Central Europe. That's our mains voltage here. And this is the IEC connector. The center pin there gets connected to the chassis. That's our earth. And the two other pins are connected to our main switch, which is fused with a 2 ampere fuse. From there, the signal goes to the primaries of our mains transformer. And you can see here, the orange tap is the 230 volt tap that is connected in this schematic, and the common blue tap. There are various taps in between for different regions. I think yellow would be for Australia. I think they have 240 volts normally on their plugs. Purple is 220 volts. And black is 120 volts. That's for the US market, I believe. And one curiosity here, we can see that our pilot lamp is connected between the blue and the black 120 volt tap here. Nominally, this pilot lamp is specified for 110 volts. More often than not, you'd usually find the pilot lamp here on the secondary side for the same circuit as the tube heaters. So something around between 3 and 5 volts. But I guess that's just a preference thing. It's just something I noticed. So then the signal goes through the mains transformer, and a transformer does just that. It transforms electrical signals, changes voltages and currents, basically. So in theory, the power on both sides of the transformer is the same. So the product out of voltage times amperage, volts by current, that's the power. So it means that the transformer can turn a signal or an electrical signal that has low voltage and high current into a signal that has high voltage and low current, which is what happens here. We have lower voltages on the primary side here with higher currents, and on the secondary side, we have higher voltages with lower currents. We need those to operate our tubes. And as you can see, we have various different lines on our secondary side of this transformer also that fulfill different functions. We have 2 yellow lines here with about 5 volts on them. These are not used for this project, so I believe they are placed on that 5-pin solder strip that is mounted to the side of the chassis. I suppose one could connect a pilot lamp to those also, or maybe use it for a mod, I don't know. But for now, I want to look at these 2 here. We have 2 orange lines and a brown line here. The orange lines are our filament lines, our tube heaters. That is what makes the tube glow. And the tube needs heat to work. In very simple terms, a tube gain stage works as follows. We have a cathode that is covered in chemicals. We have an anode, also known as a plate, and the control grid where the signal comes in. The heaters are used to bake electrons off the coating of the cathode. So when we apply a low voltage there, the tube heats up and electrons get baked off the cathode into the vacuum there. And when we apply a voltage between the plate and the cathode, that creates a potential for these electrons to flow. And with the control grid, where our signal comes in, we can control this flow of electrons. So that's why tubes need heat. That's why they glow. Then comes the main deal. We have 2 red taps here and 1 black center tap. These have 345 volts approximately on them. And they are connected to the standby switch, which then connects all the tubes to the high tension, to the high voltage, which is the potential we need for the electrons to flow from the cathode to the plate. Directly after the standby switch, we have 2 rectifier diodes, and we need those to convert our alternating current to direct current. We get alternating current from our wall socket, but the tubes need direct current to work. And that's what these diodes are for. A diode is kind of a check valve for electricity. The diode lets electricity flow one way, but not back the other way. So we have alternating current here. One half of the phase can go through this diode, and when the phase flips, can't go back here, but it can go through here. So we get slightly wavy, bumpy direct current. That's what these filter capacitors are for. They store electricity and they are able to smooth out that ripply direct current. Then we have a high tension fuse, 0.5 amps, 0.5 amps before the high voltage goes to supply all our vacuum tubes here. Lastly, we have the bias supply, which taps off one of the 345 volt lines here. The bias supply is, or the bias control basically is that little potentiometer, or in this case, big potentiometer we put between our two octal tube sockets in the build section. That really controls the operating point of our output tubes. And we'll get into more detail what bias is from part 3 of this series, but just know that it's important to set the bias to a proper operating point. So if all of this doesn't make an awful lot of sense to you, don't worry. As I said, we're going to go into more detail and specific details in the parts to come. This is just meant as a really rough overview, roughly how the schematic is built up and how the amp works, with a little focus on the power supply today. And that concludes part 1 of my tube amp building series. I hope you found this informative, at least, maybe even a little entertaining. And I hope to see you for part 2, where we're going to wire up the components we put into the chassis so far, and we're going to take a more detailed look at the filaments, the tube heating, as well as the filter capacitors. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you for part 2. Bye-bye.